I wonder what you were doing in 1985. 1985. Some probably weren't even born. If you were born in the 60s like me, I was 17 in 1985. I'm not sure if you know, just some random facts. Bob Hawke was the Prime Minister. John Howard was in the leader of the opposition. Alan Border was the cricket captain. They were the glory days. For the Bulldog supporters, and there's one here today I know, they won the premiership in 1985. Haven't won a thing since, but that's okay. And Essendon won the AFL Grand Final. There's a blast from the past. Essendon winning something. There you go. But in 1985, I lived in Bundaberg, a 17-year-old, was working full-time. I was one of those young guys when you have a flat stomach, you have muscles, and to top it all off, I owned a Datsun 120Y. Oh. Not only was it yellow, you know the baby poo yellow, it had mag wheels. I was pretty cool. And one of the cool guys in the 80s who wore a white watch as well. Remember when the white watches were in? Maybe it was just a Bundaberg thing. Anyway. But in 1985, at the age of 17, I went to a church very, very similar to this. Same size, same kind of culture, same love for God. And I was invited to do the Sunday service. It's a pretty big thing. Big thing for the church and a big thing to ask a 17-year-old. I'd done my message, and as I finished, I sat down, then the service closed. And as I just stood there waiting to go up, the most scariest lady in the whole church started walking towards me. She had her two sons hanging onto their hands, pretty much dragging them. And as I caught her eye, I knew she was coming straight for me. As a 17-year-old or as a 57-year-old, I'm still petrified of this lady. She was known to be brutal. And as she's walking to me, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the last time that I'll ever speak. And as she got closer to me, and then she stood right in front and she looked into my eyes and said, I just want to chat to you about your sermon. I wish I was I could have been anywhere in the world but standing in front of her. I knew what was coming. Then she said, thank you for your message. It's the first message my two boys have ever listened to. I'm like, oh my goodness, God is doing something. This lady's being friendly. And she said, Jeff, I got a word for you. For the rest of your life, if you're ever invited to speak, can you just do the same as what you did today? Speak simply, tell stories, and talk of God's love. We're now 40 years later and I've remembered that. So today, I don't come as someone who is a theologian, someone who is deep into scriptures, but I'm someone who has just lived the next 40 years just sharing practically of God's love. Now, Dan's not here today, but this will be the most simplest message you've heard all year. Really simple. But I believe it's incredibly powerful if you grab hold of the message today. And I want to talk to you about a word called hallmarks. I'm not sure if you know the word hallmark. It's not something when you go out, if I go out to golf with Toby, we don't rock up and go, how's your hallmark? Ladies in a coffee shop don't chat about a hallmark. You may know hallmark from a card. It's probably where you think of. This is a Father's Day card. My family, we buy cards, but we never write in them. It's a pretty cool tip. Saves you plenty of money. So you'll notice this is my Father's Day card, nothing in it. 2 years later, I'll get the same card because it's never written in. And that's one of what our family does. So if you're looking to save money, that's a little tip for you today. So what is a hallmark? A hallmark is a mark which shows that an item has been independently tested and it's matching its description and conforms to all the legal standards of purity. You may have at home some plates or cups, some kind of items. If you go home and look at it, they'll have something written on the back. It'll tell you where it's from. It'll tell you some dates. It might even tell you some things on jewellery, like on the picture. That is what we call a hallmark. Here's some random information. Hallmark started in the year 1300, long time ago, and they are still part of the world today. Jewellery, items, all different things will have this hallmark in. And over in England, the hallmark shows where it's been built, which hall that it comes from. So basically, a hallmark is a guarantee of quality and purity. So if it started in 1300 and it's still in law today, it means it's pretty popular, isn't it? So that little introduction is what we want to chat through today. And there's a Bible verse which actually talks about hallmarks. So I'm just going to read it to you. John chapter 20, it's on the screen as well, verse 19 to 28. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And after he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Now Thomas, someone we will know as Doubting Thomas, one of the 12, was not with his disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." And this is what Thomas says. But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Story goes on. A week later, the disciples were in the house again, and Thomas this time was with them. The doors were locked, and Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Wonder what Thomas was thinking when Jesus said that. Then he said these direct words to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." And then Thomas said these really cool words, "My Lord and my God." So there's a couple of hallmarks as we read that passage today. We see Jesus had an incredible hallmark that was a physical. He had a mark in his side, mark in his hands and his feet. And then we see Thomas had a hallmark of someone who was doubtful. And he's known as Doubting Thomas in the Bible. I actually think Thomas was a bit ripped off. I think he gets an unfair rap. You always hear people saying Doubting Thomas. I wonder if we were in the room, would we also have doubted? We hadn't seen Jesus. The disciples have just told us this story. So I think he's very unfairly treated, that everyone just refers to him as doubting. I think maybe we might have been in the same position and said, unless I see Jesus' hands and his feet, maybe I won't believe either. So if we think of that story, we think of Jesus' physical hallmark. We think of Doubting Thomas also had a hallmark of what his was. I wonder today if you have a hallmark that others see that proves that you love Jesus. It's a deep question, and I've got a few questions for you today to take home. I wonder in your workplace, in your community, if people know that you love Jesus. If you ask them what would be the hallmark of my spiritual life, what would people say? My grandma had a hallmark. She had lots of different hallmarks. She had a moustache, so that was a pretty interesting hallmark. But other than that, she had a spiritual hallmark. And her hallmark was praying for her grandkids. And I remember at her funeral thinking, I am now going to miss someone who prays for me every day. What a cool hallmark. When my dad passed away a few years ago, he had a hallmark. He was quiet, but he had a hallmark of loving us as kids. Maybe you're sitting there today thinking, this hallmark stuff, wonder what my hallmark would be. Maybe there's a hallmark that I could take on. One of my favourite Bible chapters or verses is in Galatians 5:22. You will know this one. It's very popular within our Christian communities, and it says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law." I reckon if we took on one of those characteristics and lived it out, our community, our friends, our family would be amazed and talk about our hallmark. Imagine having the hallmark of kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. Imagine having the hallmark of self-control. That would change communities. It would change your workplace. Your challenge is, I'm going to leave with you, is a challenge I took upon myself maybe a year ago. This little story and this little reflection today I've been thinking about for the last 12 months. And I shared this message in a church one Sunday, and driving home, God really spoke to me and said, you asked that church, like I'm asking today, you asked each individual to ask what would be their hallmark. And I felt God say, you need to ask someone, what is the hallmark of my life? So I went through and I thought, who am I going to ask? I was driving home and I pulled over for a sec and I thought about it. And I went through my family and thought, I don't want to ask my wife because they are brutally honest. Like, I don't want to go that far. I don't want to go down that track. And then I thought I could ask my son. He's a lovely 32-year-old, but he never answers his phone. Do you have any family like that? You can send him 1,000,000 texts and he will never reply. Never, ever. And you know he's online. You know he's on Instagram. He'll post something, but you ring him, nothing. So then it left me, I thought I could ask a mate, but then I thought I'd ask my daughter Laura. 30-year-old, lovely lady, looking for a husband if anyone's around. She said to give her a plug. She's a nurse. She owns a unit. Anything else I could tell you? And I thought, so while I've pulled over, I gave her a call and said, Laura, I've just been speaking of hallmarks. And she's like, what are you on about? What is that? She had no idea. So I explained what a hallmark was. And I said, I just want to ask you, what would be the hallmark of my life? Pretty easy question. In my mind, I thought she's going to say I'm greatest dad ever, lovely, kind, I buy her coffees, do all these things with her. The phone was dead silent. I'm like, are you there? Yep. Just thinking about it. I'm like, it's not that hard. Very simple question. Then I said again, tell me what is the hallmark of my life? Then she says these words, Dad, the hallmark of your life is, I wonder what you're all thinking. She said, you work too much. Oh, I was thinking, here I am. She's been my daughter for 30 years. Of all the memories of her dad is that I work too much. Guess she was honest. But I sat in the car with tears in my eyes thinking, what a waste of 30 years to a degree. Of all the things that she could say, she says that I work too much. It's helped me over the last 12 months to change a few things in my life. Because I thought if I live for another 20 years, imagine at my funeral, imagine on the tombstone, it says Jeff Howard, 1968 till 2028 or whenever. And it says, sorry, that's only a couple of years' time. Hope I haven't just professed something over myself. But anyway, feel free to come along if you're around. But imagine if it says that, and then, you know how it has, like my dad, we put some really nice words, and it says he worked too much. Wow. So I'm living now to change that, to have something different on my tombstone. I wonder, in your challenge is, as you drive home today, as you live this week, to ask someone in your family, What is the hallmark of your life? Maybe it's just the normal, what is the hallmark of my life? But what is the spiritual hallmark of your life? Maybe today, whatever today's date is, maybe today's the day that you change your hallmark. The other question I want to leave for you as we're part of the congregation and the leaders of Hope here is, what would people say is the hallmark of Hope Community Church? We've got a Christmas activity coming up in a couple of weeks' time. What is the hallmark that others would say of Hope Community Church? I did some research. I couldn't come up with an actual number, but Pitt Road, I tried finding out how many people drive down this road every week and every day. It didn't actually tell me, but it said in the corresponding streets that surround Pitt Road, 20 to 25,000 cars come past Pitt Road every day of the week. If there was 4 people in those cars, which there probably isn't, but on an average of 4 people, it's 100,000 people a day drive past our church. Some would look in, some won't ever look in, but some would look in, and what would they say is the hallmark of Hope Community Church? It's an interesting question because we represent Hope Community Church. I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you can't sleep at night, you might want to look up our website, Hope Community Church, because websites also show what is the hallmark of businesses and churches. If you look up our Hope Community website, it says, we exist to see spiritual seekers become fully surrendered followers of Jesus. Awesome hallmark. Good job, Tim, if you wrote that. No. It is very good. We exist to see spiritual seekers become fully surrendered followers of Jesus. Then it says you can come in your Sunday best. Interesting comment. If you'd like, but there's no pressure. Just come as you are. God looks on the inside, and we as a church want to see his people as he does. Awesome hallmark for a church. Then we've got this one written. We place a high value on prayer and the congregation ministering to one another. What an awesome hallmark for a church that's based, our hallmark is on prayer. And I see that every week. And then the biggest hallmark of all on the website that talks about Hope Community, it says, we take our coffee seriously. Wow. There you go. Pretty cool. It's true. You look it up tonight. That's what it says. We take our coffee very seriously at Hope Community. So if you share our love for coffee, please make most of our coffee cart before and after the service. It's up there. The hallmark of Hope Community alongside prayer, love, ministering to others, people becoming fully surrendered to Jesus. We have a hallmark that we love coffee. So all of those things that I've quickly told you about hallmarks, what's the point? The point is that you and I live for Jesus. And at the end of our life, people won't remember your skill set. They won't remember your finances. They won't remember the 120Y actually they will remember the 120Y I drove. But they will remember your hallmark. At every funeral you go to, people will talk about other people's hallmark. The 2 questions to go back to, what is the hallmark of your life? What is your spiritual hallmark that people know you by? As 100,000 people maybe drive past our church, what is the hallmark of Hope Community? It is a big question. The reason I want to tell you that is because life is short. And I'll ask the band to come up, but I just want to share 2 stories with you. I want to share a story to you about marbles. Did anyone have marbles at school? Yep, everyone did. Recently I heard this story, And I'll read some of it so I get it right. A gentleman was in his garage on a Saturday morning having a cup of coffee, listening to the radio, as some men do, pottering around in his shed. And then it turned into one of those Saturdays that there was a life lesson given. He turned on the radio and he heard a caller, an older gentleman, ring in. He had a wonderful voice for radio, and he spoke to the DJ, whose name was Tom. And he said, "Tom, I just want to talk to you about 1,000 marbles." And the DJ was a little bit taken back. So this guy in his shed just was intrigued. He put his coffee down and he listened to the radio. And the gentleman that called in said to the DJ, "It sounds like you're busy with your job on the radio. I'm sure they pay you well, but it's a shame you have to be away from home and your family so much. Hard to believe that a young man should have to work 70 hours a week to make ends meet. Too bad you missed your daughter's recital." And then he said to the DJ, "Let me tell you something, Tom, something that has helped me to keep a good perspective in my own life." And he said, "I want to tell you about 1,000 marbles." And then he said these words. You need to think about this. This gets a little bit complex. The average person lives 75 years. Some may live more, some may live less. But on average, people live 75 years. If you multiply 75 years by 52 weeks of the year, you come up with 3,900 Saturdays in your lifetime. Interesting, isn't it? If you live to 75, multiply it by 52, you have 3,900 Saturdays to live. That's the average person has in their lifetime. And then he said to Tom, "Stick with me." He said, "I am now 55, this guy." And he said, "I want you to think about it in detail. Being 55, I've already lived through 2,800 Saturdays. I'm 57, so my number has gone down, especially if I only live to 2028. So he got thinking. He only has, if you're 55, 1,000 of them left to enjoy if you live to 75. You may want to do the maths when you get home. Some of us will have more Saturdays, some will have left. So what this guy did, he said he went out and bought every single marble he could find. He went to every different store he could find and he bought 1,000 marbles to represent the Saturdays that he had left. He took them all home. It's a lot of marbles, isn't it? He took them all home. He put them in a large plastic container in the garage. Every Saturday since then, he's taken one of the marbles out and thrown it away. He found that by watching the marbles diminish, he focused on the more important things of life. There's nothing like watching your time here on earth run out to help you get your priorities straight, as you see marbles disappearing out of a box. So as we finish today, the reason hallmarks are important is because we don't know how many more Saturdays we have left. We might have 1,000, we might have 20, we might have 500. But we have a privilege to live for Jesus and to shine his light as our hallmark. Time is precious. There's no guarantee of how many Saturdays we have left. And that's why life is serious. Because it's not about our Saturdays. I love Saturdays. But life ultimately isn't about our Saturdays. It's how we live them for Jesus. One of my favourite songs, if you want to look up, is a song called Follow. It's written by Melody Malone and the Passion Group. And it came out in 2024. And it says these words: "Captive to Christ, I know true freedom. I count it all joy to take up my cross, I'd follow. Those earthly wells have left me thirsty. All worldly wisdom comes up empty. Only your word and only your ways I'll follow. What a joy it is to follow Jesus. What a gift to bear his name. What an honour to choose surrender and make him my everything. I want to encourage you as we finish today, as you go home and you live this week, just to go back and reflect on those questions. What is the hallmark of your life? If you have teenage children, you may want to ask them, what is the hallmark of your life? And then change it, like I had to do, change your hallmark. What is the spiritual hallmark of your life? As you go into the office tomorrow, as you go into school, as you go into the workplace, would anyone even know that you have a spiritual hallmark? What would your kids at home say is your spiritual hallmark? As a church building, as a Baptist community on Pitt Road, with 100,000 people maybe going past our driveway every day, what is the hallmark of Hope Community Church? And for all of us, depending on the Saturdays we have to live, one day those Saturdays will be gone. What will be the hallmark that is written on our tombstone that reflects Jesus? Will there even be a reflection that represents Jesus on our tombstone? And I don't know about you, but I want this to be written on my hallmark. The hallmark that says that Jeff works too much. I don't have long to change it, but I'm trying to change that every day. And my hallmark that I'm committed to is that it's a joy to follow Jesus. It's a gift to bear his name. What an honour to choose surrender and make him my everything for the Saturdays that I have left. Let me pray. Dear Lord, we just want to thank you that we follow a God that has an incredible hallmark of love and forgiveness that loves us today. Lord, we're sorry that our hallmarks might have got wrong, for the people we've hurt. Lord, for the things that might represent us that are wrong, we apologise and we say sorry. Lord, for the Saturdays we have left, for the days we have left, we want to follow you. May our hallmark as people and as a church represent you. May our hallmark be of people that love you, that serve you, and we surrender to love you. So bless us today, we pray.